Hello, welcome. You're watching Pantau Belanjawan with me, Nina Rosman, and talking about the global semiconductor landscape is shifting and Malaysia is stepping up to solidify its role in the industry. But can it stand alongside powerhouses like Taiwan and Singapore, from strategic partnerships with ARM Holdings to navigating US-China trade tension? Malaysia is ramping up efforts in AI chips, 6G technology and even foreign investment. The question is, will these moves be enough to transform Malaysia into a global semiconductor leader? And to break it all down, we're joined by Raja Hamzah Abidin, Raja Nong, Chik, the board director at TalentCorp. I want to say thank you very much, Raja, for joining me. Firstly, talking about the journey, Malaysia journey in semiconductor, how does Malaysia's current role in the global semiconductor supply chain compare to other major players like Taiwan and Singapore?
Hey, good morning, everyone. I think Malaysia stands at a very interesting crossroads, especially at the time where we have, on one end, Trump talking a lot more about localization, and at the same time, global supply chains becoming a bit more erratic and a bit more difficult to predict. I think we have probably a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to catch production moving out of traditional areas like Taiwan and China, who are looking at a neutral ground. Malaysia has always been a neutral manufacturing ground. It's one of the few areas where, for example, in the data center space, ByteDance, Microsoft, Google can all coexist within one country and even one state. So again, I think we've proven ourselves to be neutral from a business point of view, where our top trading partners include the likes of the US and China. But at the same time, we are able to sell our products to the globe. In terms of where we are specifically at the moment, if you look at a lot of our listed companies and the larger companies in the space, it is focused more traditional, OSAT, which is, assembly and testing. But there is a drive to move into advanced packaging and, further up the value chain. And that's seen across all the players that I've spoken to. So I was just in Penang about, 2 weeks ago, speaking to the likes of, Upstar, Skychip, Inari. I mean, I think we have good local companies, but I think now we have to work together to help them, target the global audience, or grow bigger globally, either through partnerships or through capital, right? So again, I think just to answer that question, I think we are getting more competitiveness. It is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity of companies wanting to invest more and spend more time here, both from an equity point of view, which means more funds coming in, but at this time also business development. There is a lot more overseas companies coming in. Our local companies should be ready to sambot these guys, meaning to work with them, to partner with them, to grow a bigger pie together.
And as you mentioned, we have very good local companies, but it's time for us to strengthen our cooperation to achieve within the semiconductor ecosystem, within the global stage. And maybe Raja can share with us what are strategic advantages and disadvantages does Malaysia face in moving up the semiconductor value chain from assembly and testing, chip design and water fabrication?
Okay, so one thing that everyone talks about is talent. Okay, we have English-speaking talent that is relatively affordable. What that means is that, we have a steady supply of engineers, albeit not enough at this juncture. And also, our best engineers usually move to countries like Singapore, who pay more. But remember, I was just speaking to Intel's design team in Penang under Altera. So they were saying that their average salaries of their design engineers about 15,000 ringgit a month, so about 180,000 ringgit a year. Right? In the Malaysian terms, that's pretty healthy. So again, I think one of the advantages we have is we have a strong base of talent, especially in Penang, that we can leverage to move up the value chain. So engineers are probably the backbone of a strong semiconductor ecosystem. Secondly, I think in terms of advantage that we have, actually there is already an ecosystem in Malaysia focused on semiconductor. So again, it's more about linking the dots and how do we build incremental strength to what we have. So we are not going to jump from assembly to fabrication unless we are able to pump multi-billion dollars, right? So I think we slowly move out the value chain. Design is one area where we can spend more time because it's very talent focused. So again, what do we do to subsidize the talent? How do we keep the talent, within Malaysia? How do we actually maybe create subsidies focused on, semiconductor related talent? So again, I think we've got to be flexible in terms of what kind of incentives that we provide so that we can keep the strategic advantage of talent. I think on the point of sort of disadvantage, I would feel that a lot of our local companies are still not yet prepared, either from a information or exposure point of view, or even a capital point of view to move up the value chain, right? So every time you move up the value chain, there's also capex investments involved. There's maybe guarantees and loans that you take up. So again, it's always moving out of your comfort zone, right? But at least now there are foreign players who are willing to de-risk part of it, either from investors coming in or even companies moving out of the likes of China. So there is an easier way to shortcut this journey to limit the disadvantage or the risk in terms of execution into higher value add activities. I think ARM is one example, right? So I mean, it was when it got announced earlier this week, great job to Kementerian Economy and also the Ministry of Trade in terms of getting them in. I think that's a big sign in terms of Malaysia and its ability to bring strong global companies in. But I think the details will be in the fine print, right? How much are we investing? How much is the government investing? I don't have those figures. There was amounts of $250 million that we have to invest to get them going over here. So again, we'll
All right, Roger, as you mentioned, can we recap? One of the strong talent is one of the good, or we can say a very strong foundation to move up the value chain, and engineers are one of the backbones within the semiconductor ecosystem. And we can say probably in the disadvantages is the preparedness and we can say readiness for local companies to adapt within the semiconductor ecosystem. But I'm sorry, I just got the information that we're having a bit slightly technical problem as Pantau Belanjawan will be taking a short break and we'll be right back. All right, we're back and still with our guest ready on the line is Raja Hamzah, Board of Director, TalentCorp. We say thank you very much for joining us. Previously, before we taking a break, you were sharing with us the advantages and disadvantages that Malaysia face in moving up the value chain within the semiconductor system. And what advantages that we have is local companies with need talent, we can say engineer subsidies to move up the value chains. Then this is where we can see the opportunities for Malaysia. And in terms of disadvantages, we can see the readiness of the companies to adapt. And this may lead to foreign players may de-risk investment in Malaysia. And this is how we can see the situation within the Malaysia ecosystem semiconductor to move up the value chain. And talking about the recent partnership, how critical is Malaysia partnership with ARM Holdings to the country's semiconductor ambitions, and how can it reshape the nation's position in the global tech market?
So I think in terms of hello, yes.
Please continue.
Okay, in terms of the ARM Holdings itself, I think it is a big sign that they are confident in how we do business, and they are confident in terms of how Malaysia does business and its talent pool. I think there's a big part of talent development that is listed there in terms of growing engineers. So I would love to further details on that. But ARM is, a big company, right? So they are a $124 billion business. So again, they have scale to grow, to invest, and to do more. So meaning that I think in terms of Malaysia's readiness, I think this is probably in terms of the semicon space, the biggest sign that we are very much open for business. I had at least 5 to 8 people from overseas who texted me to get details on what's this announcement, what's the terms and conditions. So I think before we can decide on how effective it is, number one, I think overall it's a great sign, but at the same time, let's see what is the fine print of this announcement.
All right, that is for us to wait after the fine print. And what are some of the potential economic impacts on Malaysia if the US imposes tariffs on semiconductor exports? And how could this disrupt Malaysia's trade relationships?
So I don't think it's so simple yet, because at the same time, I mean, people still need clients, people still need products, and people still need chips. So again, I think even if there's tariffs, maybe margin profiles will go down slightly, but at the same time, it still takes time for alternative supplies to come in. Obviously, the US is trying to produce more locally, but the global supply chain is very complex, so you won't be able to just move supply without building capacity yet. So I think in the short term, there'll be more noise versus impact. I believe companies will still continue to get decent clients, and the client base will be okay. But at the same time, I think the more important part is what's the impact of the tariffs to global growth. I think that's key. I think the second half last year, where global growth was a bit more uncertain, this had an impact on the semiconductor space. So I remember during COVID, when there was supply disruptions, everyone increased supply after that, and then they waited for demand to catch up, right? And again, because of the ramp up in production, there's been a slight oversupply in the semicon space, hence why the market's been a bit slow in the second half of last year. But I think you fast forward this year, I think we have to wait and see to see where is global growth going to be at. And again, I think growth is kind of the underpinning of how is it the trade for technology and semicon chips are going. There was some noise about chips from Nvidia rerouting through Malaysia for China. So again, that noise doesn't help as well. But overall, I think within that space, I'm still positive over the medium and long term, just because of the underlying demand that we have in this space.
And I know it's not easy for this short-term noise, as for this it will take a little bit time because people still need products, services, chips, as you mentioned, and for the alternative will take a bit longer time. But what we should focus moving forward is the impact of tariff toward the growth of semiconductor. And definitely this is something that we have to address from Malaysia and every other country. And other than that, how does Malaysia plan to address its current gaps in chip design, advanced manufacturing and R&D, which are critical for the future growth of its semiconductor industry?
I think just speaking of my experience in TalentCorp so far, I'm not day to day, but I'm on the board. I think we've been speaking to industry players. Again, it's still in the work in progress. We created a talent council focused on the semiconductor space. So we are trying to get the best minds locally to come together to come up with programs for our people to go up the value chain in terms of their information and knowledge as well. So how do we do that? The execution, I think, is it through TVETs? Is it through partnerships with universities? I think it's still a bit too early to tell. But at the same time, we are having these discussions to solve the talent gap. I think the talent gap is probably the most critical issue that we see now. If you speak to a lot of the players around, both local and foreign, there's always a fight for talent, which is not only locally but also globally. So again, I think with our talent pool, we just got to keep churning out numbers, keep churning out students and graduates who fit this gap, but at the same time work very close with industry. I think we had a conversation with Casey from Inari, a few weeks ago. I think he's very much focused on this area as well, in terms of how do we create programs to help, because again, the local companies and the foreign companies can actually do an offtake of these people if they meet the needs. And again, they also have issues where their staff is being poached to another organization, right? So if we can create that steady pool of talent, I think the pay issue will solve itself out. I'm actually a bit less worried on that, because generally speaking, pay in the semicon space is pretty attractive vis-a-vis other industries. But I think now there is a specific need to kind of come to the table, what kind of talent you need, right? And let's solve that together, both from a public and private sector point of view.
And that's for we need to work together. And I want to move on the role on special economic zones, SEZs, and tax incentives play in attracting foreign investment, especially from US semiconductor companies to enhance Malaysia competitiveness. What's your POV, Raja?
I think, sorry, do you mind repeating the question? Is it on US companies and tariffs and tax incentives?
I'm asking on the role of Special Economic Zone SEZ. Can SEZ and tax incentive play in attracting foreign investment, especially from US semiconductor companies, to enhance Malaysia competitiveness and resilience?
So I feel like for a lot of the large, big companies, especially in the semicon space, MIDA is already sort of man marking them already. So meaning that they are, extending incentives to a lot of these companies already, and those incentives are probably competitive to what is the likes of Singapore and Vietnam are offering. But I think one key thing that we have that most other countries don't have is that ecosystem. And the ecosystem mainly it's still based in Penang, but I think we want to expand it, in Johor, in Malacca to a certain extent as well. But why is this ecosystem important? Okay, an ecosystem means that one, if you need the people that are within that vertical, there is a supply of talent around. Number two, in terms of I think semiconductor chips, I think there is there's a huge global supply chain that works around it, right? So if in one case, even though you're selling to a foreign company, that foreign company may be based in next to you, the factory could be next to you in Penang, so you could be actually selling to your neighbor, even though it's another company altogether. What that means is that the ecosystem is important that can't be easily replicated. So I mean, if you look at the map of Penang, there's actually like 50 plus local and global companies that are around. I think that cannot be created in just a year or two. It takes multiple years of innovation and acceleration of them coming in. But nowadays we are in a very different competitive pool as well, because a lot of countries are pushing dollars, grants, and incentives to a lot of these foreign companies. So we just have to play catch up. I believe if our incentives are like for like as good as anyone else, I don't see any reason why foreign semiconductor business will not spend more time in Malaysia. Speaking to both investors and players in this space, there is a natural demand already to come here. So we just have to facilitate. We don't have to, in a way, sell too hard. They already want to be here to a certain extent.
All right, Raja, I'm sorry, we have to cut short for this discussion as we'll be taking the visual and footage of the updates at the PMO.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh dan salam sejahtera. Urusan pilihan raya kecil Dewan Negeri N48 Air Kuning Perak. Suruhanjaya Pilihan Raya Malaysia SPR telah menerima pemakluman rasmi daripada Yang Berhormat Datuk Muhammad Zahir bin Datuk Abdul Khalid, Yang di-Pertua Dewan Negeri Perak, berhubung dengan kekosongan luar jangka kerusi Dewan Negeri N48 Air Kuning Perak. Sehubungan itu, SPR telah mengadakan mesyuarat khas pada hari ini dan memutuskan satu pilihan raya kecil Dewan Negeri N48 Air Kuning Perak hendaklah diadakan bagi mengisi kekosongan kerusi tersebut. Urusan permohonan semua kategori undi pos luar negara dan dalam negara bagi PRK Dewan Negeri N48 Air Kuning Perak dibuka bermula hari ini 7 Mac 2025, manakala tarikh tutup permohonan adalah seperti berikut. Yang pertama, 1A, petugas pilihan raya ahli, pegawai SPR, anggota polis, anggota tentera dan petugas media pada 9 April 2025 iaitu hari Rabu. Kategori kedua, 1B, warga negara Malaysia yang berada di luar negara, tarikh tutup adalah pada 20 Mac 2025 iaitu hari Khamis. Dan kategori 3, 1C, agensi ataupun organisasi, tarikh tutup adalah pada 20 Mac 2025. Bagi menjalankan proses PRK Dewan Negeri N48 Air Kuning Perak ini, SPR telah melantik seorang pegawai pengurus dibantu oleh 3 orang penolong pegawai pengurus. Manakala bagi tujuan memantau aktiviti kempen pilihan raya sepanjang tempoh rasmi berkempen, SPR akan menubuhkan satu pasukan penguatkuasa kempen pilihan raya yang turut dianggotai oleh wakil daripada pihak Polis Diraja Malaysia, pihak berkuasa tempatan dan calon yang bertanding. Daftar pemilih pilihan raya yang akan digunakan untuk PRK Dewan Negeri N48 Air Kuning Perak ini adalah daftar pemilih terkini sehingga daftar pemilih tambahan bagi bulan Januari 2025 yang dikemaskini sehingga 22 Februari 2025. Daftar pemilih pilihan raya PRK Dewan Negeri N48 Air Kuning Perak ini mengandungi seramai 31,897 orang pemilih. PRK Dewan Negeri N48 Air Kuning Perak memerlukan peruntukan sebanyak ringgit Malaysia 2.5 juta. Berikut adalah tarikh-tarikh penting bagi PRK Dewan Negeri N48 Air Kuning Perak. Bagi maksud menjalankan PRK Dewan Negeri N48 Air Kuning Perak, SPR telah menetapkan tarikh-tarikh penting seperti berikut. Tarikh RID adalah pada 7 Mac 2025, iaitu hari ini. Hari penamaan calon pada 12 April 2025, iaitu hari Sabtu. Hari undi awal pada 22 April 2025, hari Selasa. Dan hari mengundi adalah pada 26 April 2025, iaitu hari Sabtu. Sekian, terima kasih.
Terima kasih diucapkan kepada Yang Berbahagia Datuk Seri di atas sidang media itu tadi. Hadirin yang dimuliakan, acara diteruskan lagi dengan majlis penyerahan rit dan watikah pelantikan kepada pegawai pengurus bagi pilihan raya kecil Dewan Negeri N48 Air Kuning Perak. Untuk itu, majlis dengan segala hormat menjemput Yang Berusaha Encik Ahmad Ridaudin bin Ahmad Syukuri untuk menerima rit dan watikah pelantikan daripada Yang Berbahagia Datuk Seri.